So imagine, just for a second, that you just woke up, but you didn't wake up in your bed. You are suspended in midair, like floating in a perfect temperature-controlled void.
Oh, wow. Sounds relaxing, actually.
Right. But wait, it gets weirder. You can't see anything. It's pitch black. You can't hear anything. Your arms and legs are, they're splayed out so they aren't even touching each other.
Okay, so total sensory deprivation.
Exactly. Total sensory deprivation. And you have absolutely zero memories of your life before this exact second. Like you are completely 100% cut off from the physical world and from your own body.
Yeah.
So here's the million-dollar question. In that state, with no body, no senses, no memory, do you still know that you exist?
I mean, it is just one of the most brilliant, haunting thought experiments ever devised.
And what blows my mind is that it wasn't devised in like a modern psychology lab, right?
Yeah.
Or by some 20th century existentialist philosopher.
Yeah, not at all.
1,000 years ago, a medieval doctor, who, by the way, was literally on the run from mercenary soldiers at the time, he used this exact scenario to prove that you have an immortal soul.
Which, perfectly encapsulates what we are doing today in this deep dive.
Mhm.
Because we are looking at an era, specifically the 10th and 11th centuries, where the goal of intellectual life wasn't just to figure out one tiny sliver of reality.
Right.
It was to explain absolutely everything.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this, you're probably someone who loves to learn, but you're also probably swimming in this massive sea of fragmented information. I mean, we all are.
Oh, constantly.
You get like a deep dive here, a documentary there, maybe an article about quantum physics, a tweet about politics, it's all scattered. But making sense of it all, like putting it into a structure where the physics of the universe actually connects to the psychology of your brain.
Which connects to how a government should be run.
Exactly.
And that is the holy grail of learning. And it's what our subjects today actually achieved. We are diving into the minds of two monumental intellectual giants, Al-Farabi, and a man who came a century later named Ibn Sina, who is often known in the West as Avicenna.
Right.
And they took the massive, incredibly dense philosophical systems of the ancient Greeks, like Plato and Aristotle, and they synthesized them with Islamic thought to build this breathtakingly detailed architecture of reality.
And the way they did it is just a wild ride. But we have to start at the foundation.
We do.
Because before you can have the guy running from mercenaries doing sensory deprivation thought experiments, you need the guy who built the actual philosophical scaffolding. You need Al-Farabi.
Yes, the architect.
Who I should add was known as the second teacher, which is the first teacher being Aristotle. So, no pressure there.
Yeah, just second to the guy who basically invented logic.
Right. So who was this guy? Where does he come from?
Well, Al-Farabi is the founder of Arab Neo-Platonism. He originally came from a place called Farab in Transoxiana, which is in modern-day Central Asia.
Okay.
But he spent his formative years growing up in Damascus.
Okay.
And what makes him so compelling right off the bat is that his intellectual pedigree doesn't start in some lavish, gilded palace library. By day, he worked as a humble garden keeper.
Literally a gardener.
A gardener.
Yeah.
Pulling weeds, tending plants. And by night, he was so consumed by this desire to understand reality that he would read philosophical texts by the light of the night watchman's torch.
Wait, like he didn't even have his own light.
Exactly. He couldn't afford his own candles or oil, so he'd sit near the city guards just to get enough ambient light to read ancient Greek philosophy.
I just love the visual of that. I mean, this quiet, eccentric guy tending the roses during the day, and then at night he's like squinting by a flickering torch trying to decipher the secrets of the universe.
It's incredibly poetic. And that quiet dedication eventually leads him to Baghdad. Now, Baghdad in the 10th century is the absolute intellectual capital of the world.
Right, the golden age.
Yeah, it is this massive melting pot of translations, debates, and scholars. And there, Al-Farabi begins studying logic under Christian scholars, specifically a prominent teacher named Yohanna. And very quickly, Al-Farabi's mind just outstrips everyone.
He just leaves them in the dust.
Oh, completely. He blows past his Muslim contemporaries. He blows past his Christian teachers.
But I'm looking at my notes here, and it says that despite having this universe-sized brain, he was kind of a weirdo, right?
He was a fascinating bundle of contradictions. So eventually his reputation grows, and he leaves Baghdad for Aleppo in northern Syria. And he joins the court of the Hamdani prince, Saif al-Dawla.
Okay.
Now, this prince was a massive patron of the arts and sciences. He wanted the best minds at his court.
Yeah.
But Al-Farabi was not your typical polished, sycophantic courtier.
Wait, he's a guy who used to read by a guard's torch.
exactly. He was known for having somewhat boorish manners, and he would show up to these lavish, formal court gatherings wearing outlandish, traditional Central Asian attire that completely clashed with the highly sophisticated Arab styles of Aleppo.
So he's basically the medieval equivalent of the tech billionaire who shows up to a black tie gala wearing a hoodie and flip-flops.
Precisely. That is exactly the vibe. And despite being naturally ascetic, I mean, he was very modest, didn't care about wealth, preferred total solitude. When he was forced into the prince's presence, he had this shocking flair for showmanship.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he would occasionally play musical instruments he invented, and supposedly he could make the entire court laugh, then weep, then fall asleep, just to prove his mastery over human emotions.
That is amazing, like a philosophical rock star.
Pretty much.
But let's get into the actual meat of what he was doing by that watchman's torch, because he's not just passively reading Aristotle, right? He's obsessed with how he actually got Aristotle in the first place.
Okay. Yes. His intellectual lineage was deeply important to him. In a lost work called The Rise of Philosophy, Al-Farabi does something extraordinary. He traces the actual literal transmission of Aristotle's texts through history.
To prove what?
To prove that the knowledge hasn't been corrupted. He writes about how, after Aristotle died, his teachings remained unchanged in Alexandria, Egypt, through the reign of the Ptolemaic kings.
Okay, so it stays in Egypt for a few hundred years. Then what happens?
Then the Romans arrive. Augustus conquers Egypt. Cleopatra dies. And Augustus, being this meticulous administrator, audits the libraries.
Naturally.
And he finds these ancient books written during Aristotle's time. So he orders copies to be made for Rome and keeps some in Alexandria. Al-Farabi maps out how this dual lineage survives side by side in Rome and Alexandria until the rise of Christianity.
And then it moves again.
Right.
Yeah.
The center of intellectual gravity eventually shifted to Antioch and then finally to Baghdad.
So he's essentially proving a chain of custody for human knowledge. He's saying, I am the direct, uncorrupted inheritor of a 1,000-year-old tradition.
But he doesn't just inherit it, he radically upgrades it.
Okay, how so?
Well, the earlier philosophical schools, especially the Alexandrian tradition, they only taught logic up to a very specific safe point. They would read Aristotle's Analytica Priora, the prior analytics, and then they would stop.
Okay, I have to stop you there because I do not speak ancient Greek syllabus.
Fair enough.
What is the Analytica Priora and why were they stopping there?
Good question. The Analytica Priora is Aristotle's basic manual on the syllogism. It teaches you how to construct a basic, structurally valid, logical argument.
Like, give me an example.
The classic one, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal.
Got it. Basic deductive reasoning.
Right. But the next book in Aristotle's series was the Analytica Posteriora, the Posterior Analytics, or the Book of Demonstration.
And this was the dangerous one.
Very.
Yeah.
Because this book didn't just teach you how to make a structurally valid argument, it taught you how to prove that the premises of your argument are absolutely universally true, leading to undeniable scientific certainty. And the earlier Christian and Alexandrian schools actively avoided teaching it.
Because it demanded a level of rigorous proof that might conflict with religious dogma.
Exactly. It was considered philosophically dangerous. If you apply the Book of Demonstration to theology and you can't logically prove your theology with absolute scientific certainty,
The whole thing falls apart.
the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
But Al-Farabi refuses to stop. He breaks the tradition. He dives headfirst into the Analytica Posteriora, taking Islamic philosophy to a completely new, unprecedented level of rigorous, demanding proof.
He's not messing around.
No. He refuses to accept anything on mere authority or blind faith if it can't be demonstrated logically.
And he applies this obsessive need for categorization and proof to literally everything, right? I'm looking at this text he wrote, The Enumeration of the Sciences.
Yes. The enumeration of the sciences is essentially his attempt to map all human knowledge, every single thing. He divides everything you could possibly know into 8 major headings.
What?
Linguistic sciences, logical, mathematical, physical, metaphysical, political, juridical, and theological.
It's like he's inventing the ultimate Dewey Decimal System for the medieval mind.
That's a great way to put it.
But what fascinates me here is a distinction he makes right at the beginning of this system, this split between grammar and logic. Why go out of your way to separate those two? I mean, aren't they both just the study of language?
It seems like a small distinction, but it is actually a massive philosophical stake in the ground. Al-Farabi argues that grammar is merely conventional. It is an accident of geography.
Okay, meaning what?
Meaning, the rules of Arabic grammar only apply to people who speak Arabic. The rules of Greek apply to Greeks. It's just local custom. But logic is the universal grammar of the human mind.
Oh, wow.
He says it governs what he calls the inner and outer speech of all humanity, regardless of what nation they belong to.
So he's saying that the actual mechanics of how we think are universally identical, even if the sounds coming out of our mouths are different?
Precisely. He is saying that if you want to guard against error, if you want to know if a belief is actually true, it is not enough to just freeze it beautifully in Arabic or Greek.
Right.
You have to strip away the cultural language entirely and examine the bare structural mechanics of the thought itself using this universal canon of logic.
I love how uncompromising that is. It's just pure structure. And I want to talk about how he applies this uncompromising logic to something that was incredibly popular in his day, and honestly is still popular today, astrology.
Yes. His takedown of astrology is a masterpiece of sober, mechanical thinking. Because he was actually approached by an anxious astrologer who asked him basically, is what I do real?
And Al-Farabi just obliterates the guy's entire profession.
He does, but he does it systematically, which makes it even worse for the astrologer. He starts by acknowledging what is physically true. He says, look, heavenly bodies absolutely exert a physical influence on the Earth. The sun, for instance, heats up certain regions of the Earth based on its proximity and angle. That's a physical reality. That is the science of astronomy. You can compute that.
Ugh.
But the idea that a planet's position somehow dictates human events, that it predicts whether a king will win a war or whether you'll have a good harvest.
He's not buying it.
He says that is completely bogus. He argues that earthly events are either determined by strictly ascertainable physical causes, or they are just fortuitous chance occurrences. There's no magical planetary energy controlling your fate.
My favorite part is his argument about the solar eclipse, because back then, if a solar eclipse happened, people panic, right? It was this massive omen, the gods were angry, a kingdom was going to fall.
And Al-Farabi looks at that panic and basically rolls his eyes. He explains the exact physical mechanism. He says, an eclipse is simply the moon passing between our line of sight and the sun. That's it.
It's just a rock getting in the way.
It is an opaque rock getting in the way of the light. He argues that just because a physical object blocks your view of the sun, it does not magically turn it into an omen of disaster.
Right. Because if it did, then literally anything that blocks your view of the sun would be an omen. If I, hold my hand up to block the sun, does that dictate my fate?
Exactly. It's a flawless reduction to absurdity. He demands causality. If A causes B, show me the mechanism. And he goes even further. He turns it into a personal roast of the astrologers.
Oh, I love this part.
He points out that the most famous wealthy astrologers of his day don't even use their own astrological charts to manage their personal affairs or their investments.
So they don't even believe their own hype.
He basically says, if you guys can really see the future, why are you still working for hire? He calls it out as a medieval grift born of habit and a quest for profit.
Okay, so we've established that Al-Farabi demands rigorous causality. He demands a physical mechanism. He hates superstition. But how does a guy with a mind that strict and scientific view God?
It's a great question.
Because he's a Muslim living in a deeply religious society, but his idea of God sounds, well, very different from the traditional view.
Very different. For Al-Farabi, you don't start with a God who has a human personality, a God who gets angry, or who makes moment-to-moment decisions. His map of reality starts at the absolute top, with what he calls the first being.
The first being?
Yes, this is heavily influenced by the Greek philosopher Plotinus' concept of the one. The first being is completely perfect, completely uncaused, and completely immaterial. It has no parts.
But wait, if it's completely immaterial and has no parts, what actually is it? What does it do all day?
This is where we get the famous Latin phrase intellectus intelligence,
Which means?
It means thought thinking itself. Because the first being is purely immaterial, it is, by definition, a pure intellect. And because it is absolutely perfect, it lacks nothing.
Okay.
Therefore, it doesn't need to look outside of itself for anything to understand or contemplate. It eternally, perfectly contemplates its own essence.
Just thinking about itself forever.
Yes. And because it is contemplating the most perfect object in existence itself, this contemplation is attended by the greatest possible enjoyment, beauty, and love.
Let me see if I am grasping this. God is essentially this perfect supercomputer that is running a single program, and that program is just contemplating its own perfect code.
That's a really modern but accurate way to look at it.
But if this first being is totally self-absorbed in its own perfection, how does the universe get made? Did this perfect intellect suddenly decide, you know what, I'm going to make some planets and some humans today?
No, and this is crucial. The first being does not choose to create the universe out of a desire or a shifting whim.
Why not?
Because if it had a desire to create something it didn't already have, that would mean it was lacking something,
Mm-hmm.
which would mean it wasn't perfect.
Oh, right. If you want something, you lack it. Okay, so how are we here? How does anything exist?
Through a process called emanation. Al-Farabi argues that reality overflows from the first being by a necessity of nature. It is a spontaneous act of supererogatory generosity.
Overflow.
It doesn't choose to create. Rather, because the first being is so superabundant in its perfection and existence, reality just pours out of it automatically.
I'm picturing like one of those cascading chocolate fountains at a fancy wedding.
Yes.
The chocolate at the very top tier doesn't consciously decide to fall to the second tier. It just falls because the top tier is completely full and overflowing.
That is the perfect analogy. The first being overflows, and this outpouring generates the first cosmic intellect.
Okay, so a new tier.
Right. Now, this first intellect isn't perfect like the first being. It has a duality. It thinks about its creator, and it thinks about itself. When it contemplates the first being, it generates a second intellect. When it contemplates itself, it generates the outermost sphere of the heavens.
So every time the fountain overflows to a new tier, the reality gets slightly more complex, but slightly less perfect.
Exactly. And this cascading chain produces 10 distinct intellects. With each drop down the fountain, it generates the spheres of the planets.
Which ones?
It goes down to Saturn, then Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and finally, the 10th intellect generates the sphere of the moon.
Which brings us to us.
Right. Beneath the sphere of the moon lies our world, the sublunary terrestrial realm. Now down here, the process of emanation hits the bottom and begins to build back up.
Upward.
Yeah. We start at the absolute lowest rung, with prime matter, just formless, basic stuff. Then the four elements combine to make minerals. Minerals combine to make plants. Plants evolve into animals. And at the absolute summit of this upward terrestrial spiral is humanity.
Because humans are the only things down here that possess an intellect, right?
Exactly. Man is the epitome of the physical cosmos because we combine all the lower faculties. We have the vegetative ability to grow, the animal ability to sense and move, the imaginative ability, and we crown it all with the rational faculty.
This is a staggering architecture. I mean, he's linked the pure thought of God to the orbits of the planets, all the way down to the minerals and the dirt, and then built it back up to the human brain.
It's all connected.
But he doesn't stop at the brain, does he? He applies this exact cosmic structure to human politics, which brings us to his masterwork, the Virtuous City.
Right. Al-Farabi says that if the universe is this perfectly ordered hierarchy flowing from the first being, then human society should mirror that exact structure.
As above, so below.
Exactly. The state is like a human body, or like the cosmos itself. It requires a singular heart, a central ruler, to guide all the other limbs and organs toward ultimate happiness.
But this can't just be some guy who inherited the throne or won a battle, right? I'm guessing he has standards.
Unbelievably high standards. His requirements for the ruler are incredibly strict. He's heavily borrowing from Plato's concept of the philosopher king, but he synthesizes it with this Islamic Neo-Platonic model.
What's the checklist?
The ruler of the virtuous city must possess an almost superhuman checklist of traits: immense intelligence, flawless memory, absolute moderation in food and drink, courage, natural eloquence, and an unwavering love of truth.
So basically nobody who has ever run for office.
Pretty much. This ruler acts as the earthly equivalent of the first being, emanating justice and order down through the ranks of society.
Okay, but what happens when you don't get the philosopher king? What happens when a society fails? Because he creates a whole taxonomy of failed states, right?
He does, and it's a fascinating look at political psychology. He categorizes the corrupt cities based on why they fail.
Okay, let's go through them.
First, you have the city of ignorance. The citizens here don't even know what true intellectual happiness is. They've never been exposed to the truth. Instead, they organize their entire society around base goals: the pursuit of wealth, the pursuit of sensual pleasure, or the pursuit of sheer conquest and honor.
So basically 99% of human history.
Pretty much. But then he identifies the wayward city. This one is more tragic. In the wayward city, the citizens actually know the truth. They've been taught the philosophical realities of the universe,
I love that.
but they simply fail to act on it. Their desires override their intellect.
Got it. What else?
Then you have the renegade city, which used to be virtuous but slowly lost its way over generations. And finally, the erring city, which is ruled by deception, usually by a false prophet or a charlatan who actively leads the people into delusion.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned about the city of ignorance pursuing conquest, because reading this, I was really struck by how modern his view on war is.
You're referring to his thoughts on the teleology of happiness and justice.
Here.
This is crucial. In Al-Farabi's time, and frankly for centuries after, there was a prevailing concept of natural justice,
Right.
which was essentially the idea that the strong naturally conquer the weak, that the ultimate goal of a successful state is to dominate its neighbors and take their resources.
Might makes right.
Right. But Al-Farabi vehemently rejects this. He argues that true justice is about preserving common goods within a society, security, wealth, dignity, and restoring them if they're unjustly taken.
So no empire building.
None. He explicitly states that war for the sake of pure conquest, glory, or wealth is fundamentally unjust and ruins the soul of a city. The only justified wars are for self-defense or to secure a truly necessary good for the state that cannot be achieved otherwise.
It's incredibly progressive for a guy writing in the 900s, but here is where things take a very, very dark turn.
Yes. The afterlife.
Because this political system isn't just about how you live on Earth, it directly dictates his eschatology, his view of the afterlife. And honestly, it is terrifying. Because immortality for Al-Farabi isn't a guarantee.
No, it is not. And this is perhaps his most radical departure from Orthodox theology. In traditional belief, everyone gets an afterlife.
Yeah.
You get heaven or you get hell, but you survive.
Right.
But Al-Farabi argues that the soul is not automatically immortal. Survival after physical death is strictly contingent upon your intellectual apprehension.
Meaning, if you don't use your brain to understand the universe, your soul literally doesn't form properly.
Exactly. He believes that the human intellect starts as mere potential. By studying, by grasping universal truths and living virtuously, the soul actually acquires a literal immaterial substance.
It builds itself.
Yes, the souls in the virtuous city who have achieved this intellectual perfection, they survive the death of their bodies. They shed their physical forms and enter a state of ultimate bliss, rejoining the intelligible realm of the cosmic intellects.
Okay, so the smart, virtuous people get to be floating spheres of happy energy. But what about the corrupt cities? Let's start with the wayward city, the ones who knew the truth but chose to pursue bodily pleasures instead. What happens to them?
Their fate is a uniquely psychological horror. Because they develop their intellects enough to understand the truth, their souls do survive death. They become immortal and immaterial.
Okay, that sounds fine.
However, because they spent their entire lives conditioning their souls to crave physical, bodily pleasures, food, drink, sex, wealth, status, they retain those intense yearnings even after the body rots away.
Oh.
They are completely disembodied. Yet they have a burning, lingering desire for physical satisfaction that they can never, ever fulfill. Because they no longer have nerve endings or stomachs, it is an eternal torment of unfulfilled desire.
It's like having phantom limb syndrome, but for your entire physical existence. Like, you're starving, but you have no mouth.
Exactly.
That is a horrifying concept of hell. And what about the city of ignorance? The people who just chased money and power and never even tried to grasp higher intellectual truths, what happens to them?
For them, the fate is total annihilation.
Just gone.
Just gone. Because they never actualized their potential intellect. Because they never grasped anything beyond the physical dirt of the earth, they have no immaterial substance to survive the body's death. When their heart stops beating, their soul simply perishes with it. They cease to exist entirely.
It's a meritocracy of the soul. That is just brutal. But let's take a breath here. Al-Farabi has laid down this massive, intimidating foundation. He's mapped out the sciences, debunked astrology, tracked the 10 cascading cosmic intellects, outlined the perfect political city, and tied it all to this brutal intellectual afterlife. It is a pristine, perfect theoretical architecture.
It is. But a theoretical architecture only gets you so far.
Exactly. Because the real world of the 10th and 11th centuries wasn't a pristine garden. It was chaotic, violent, and constantly shifting. So how does this incredibly complex philosophy survive when it hits the messy, volatile reality of medieval politics?
It barely does. And to understand how it's survived and evolved, we have to transition to our second subject. We have to look at a man whose life was the exact opposite of Al-Farabi's quiet garden. We have to look at Ibn Sina. or Avicenna.
The prodigy.
Right. If Al-Farabi was the meticulous architect who drew the blueprints, Ibn Sina was the restless, chaotic genius who took those blueprints and built an intellectual empire that would dominate the globe for centuries.
And what's amazing to me is that we actually know the intimate details of his life because he dictated an autobiography to his pupil. That was pretty rare for the time, right?
Very rare. And it gives us an unparalleled window into the mind of a true prodigy. And I really don't use the word prodigy lightly here. Ibn Sina was born near Bukhara, in present-day Uzbekistan.
Okay.
According to his autobiography, by the time he was 10 years old, he had memorized the entire Quran and mastered Arabic literature to the point that adults were just marveling at him.
He's basically a medieval Doogie Howser.
It goes beyond that. By age 16, he had conquered logic, advanced mathematics, and physics, and decided to pick up medicine.
Just, for fun.
Basically.
Yeah.
And he learned it so quickly that within months, senior established physicians with decades of experience were coming to him for instruction.
At 16?
Yes. And by the time he was 18, he stated plainly that he had learned all the sciences. He felt there was nothing left for him to discover.
Except for one massive brick wall he hit.
Yes. Metaphysics. This is one of the most famous anecdotes in philosophical history. He writes that he picked up Aristotle's Metaphysics. He read it, he didn't understand it, so he read it again and again. In his autobiography, he claims he read it 40 times.
40 times? That is a dense book.
He had it completely memorized. He knew every word by heart, but he writes that the intent of the author remained totally hidden from him. He fell into complete despair. He basically threw his hands up and said, "This book is incomprehensible."
I can just feel the frustration. Imagine being 18, knowing you are literally the smartest person on the planet, having conquered medicine and math, and you just cannot crack this one ancient text. The words just turn to mush. How does he finally break through?
It happens completely by chance. He is walking through the bookseller's market one afternoon, and a merchant practically forces him to buy a cheap, battered little book for 3 dirhams.
Okay.
Ibn Sina buys it out of pity.
Yeah.
He opens it up, and it turns out to be a book by Al-Farabi titled On the Intentions of Aristotle's Metaphysics.
The watchman's torch gets passed.
Exactly. He goes home, reads Al-Farabi's commentary, and instantly, because he already had Aristotle's text memorized, the entire system unlocks for him. He said the veil was lifted. He was so overjoyed that the very next day he gave lavish alms to the poor in gratitude.
So his mind is soaring in these high, perfect metaphysical realms. But his actual physical life is an absolute roller coaster. I mean, he isn't sitting in a quiet university tower.
No, his life was incredibly precarious. Shortly after this breakthrough, he manages to cure the Samanid Sultan of Bukhara of a supposedly incurable disease.
Nice.
Which is great because it earns him access to the royal library. But it also thrusts him deep into the treacherous, volatile world of medieval court politics.
And from then on, he is constantly on the run.
He is a man in perpetual motion. As dynasties collapse and warlords sweep through the region, Ibn Sina moves from Bukhara to Ray to Hamadan to Isfahan. He serves as a royal physician, sometimes as a political vizier. But his fortunes are tied completely to the shifting sands of military power. At one point, mercenary soldiers mutiny against the prince he is serving, and they demand Ibn Sina's execution. He has to go into hiding in an apothecary's house.
Wait, so the man whose mind could comprehend the 10 cosmic intellects and the pure essence of God is literally hiding in a closet, hoping soldiers don't bust the door down and kill him.
Yes. And it was during these periods of hiding, or sometimes literally while riding on horseback accompanying an army on a campaign, that he composed his massive multi-volume encyclopedias.
While running for his life.
Yeah. His most famous work, The Book of Healing, which ironically isn't just about medicine, but is a massive encyclopedia covering logic, math, physics, and metaphysics, was largely written during these periods of intense political instability.
It is a stunning paradox, and there's another paradox to his life, too. He also wrote the Canon of Medicine, which became the definitive medical textbook in Europe and the Islamic world for the next 600 years.
Absolutely foundational text.
He revolutionized pharmacology, clinical trials, the understanding of infectious diseases. But despite being the greatest doctor on earth, he didn't exactly treat his own body as a temple, did he?
No, he did not. Ibn Sina was known for his immense appetites. He worked fiercely during the day, but at night he was known to indulge heavily in wine, lavish banquets, and sexual exploits.
He liked to party.
Very much so. His friends actually warned him to slow down. They told him he was burning the candle at both ends. And Ibn Sina famously replied, I prefer a short life with width to a narrow one with length.
And it caught up to him.
It did. He died at the relatively young age of 58 from a severe bout of colic, some severe intestinal pain, which was absolutely exacerbated by his lifestyle.
And didn't he try to treat himself?
He did, but he actually tried to cure himself by administering enemas at a reckless pace, which only weakened his intestines further.
So the greatest physician in human history, the man who codified medicine for a millennium, partied himself to death and botched his own treatment. It is tragic, but it's just so deeply human.
It is. But I think this extreme contradiction actually explains his philosophy. He was living in a physical world of sheer chaos. Assassinations, mutinies, disease, his own bodily desires. The physical world was wildly unpredictable.
Right.
So in response, he built a fortress of absolute, perfect, immutable logic in his mind. He took Al-Farabi's blueprint and systematized it into something far more fluent and rigorous. He needed reality to make logical sense because his actual life made no sense at all.
Okay, I love that framing. So let's look at how he tried to make sense of the physical world. Let's dive into his physics, because he takes on this massive debate that is still relevant today. What is matter actually made of?
Well, Ibn Sina takes a very firm, heavily argued stance against atomism.
Atomism, meaning the idea that if you cut a piece of wood in half and in half again and again, eventually you hit a tiny microscopic particle that cannot be divided any further.
Correct. The ancient Greek philosopher Democritus proposed this, and many Islamic theologians of Ibn Sina's time adopted it. They believed the universe was made of discrete, indivisible atoms. But Ibn Sina says that is completely logically untenable. It is geometrically impossible.
I mean, from a modern perspective, we know atoms exist. Why did he think it was logically impossible?
He sets a brilliant logical trap. He says to his opponents, okay, let's pretend your indivisible atoms exist. I want you to imagine two of these atoms coming together to form a larger physical body.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
When they touch each other, there are only two possible ways they can interact. Option one, they join, meaning they touch edge to edge, side by side.
Okay, like two billiard balls touching.
Right. But Ibn Sina says if atom A is touching atom B on its right side, but its left side is exposed to empty space, then atom A has a right side and a left side.
Right.
And if it has distinct sides, it has parts. And if a particle has parts, it is by definition divisible. You could theoretically slice the right side away from the left side. Therefore, it is not an indivisible atom.
Oh, that is so clever. If it has an edge to touch something else, it has a boundary. If it has a boundary, it has geometry. And geometry can always be halved.
Exactly. So the atomists are forced to take option two. They say, okay, they don't touch edge to edge. They touch by completely interpenetrating, meaning they perfectly overlap, occupying the exact same space.
Like two ghosts standing in the exact same spot.
Yes, but Ibn Sina immediately shuts that down too. He says if they completely interpenetrate, they collapse into a single point. If you take one atom and you stack 1,000,000 interpenetrating atoms on top of it, they take up no more physical volume than the first atom.
Because they're all overlapping.
Right. Therefore, they could never combine to form a physical mass. You could never build a chair or a mountain out of interpenetrating points.
So he completely corners them. Adjoining means they are divisible. Interpenetrating means they can't build matter. Therefore, indivisible atoms cannot exist. So what did he believe matter was?
He believed matter was fundamentally continuous. It is a single, unbroken continuum of potential that can be infinitely divided in theory, though perhaps not in physical practice.
Okay, so the physical world is this continuous stretch of matter and form. But what about the mind inside that body? How does he map out human psychology?
He constructs a highly detailed hierarchy of the soul, divided into three main faculties. At the very bottom, you have the vegetative soul.
Vegetative, like plants.
Exactly. This is the base operating system. It handles nutrition, growth, and reproduction. Plants have this, animals have this, humans have this.
It's the autopilot keeping the biology running.
Right. Above that, you have the animal soul. This is where things get interesting. The animal soul handles motive power, the ability to move around, and the percipient power, meaning perception.
Okay.
This includes the 5 outer senses we all know: sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell. But it also includes 5 inner senses located in the brain.
Inner senses, like imagination.
Yes. Common sense, which synthesizes the 5 outer senses: imagination, memory, and a very specific inner sense that is one of Ibn Sina's most brilliant original contributions to psychology. It is called the estimative faculty, or al-wahima.
I am obsessed with this concept. Break this down, because it feels like he's trying to invent a medieval explanation for neuroscience.
It is essentially a medieval explanation for biological instinct. The estimative faculty is an inner sense that grasps unstated intentions or nonsensical qualities in an object.
Non-sensible meaning things you can't actually see or hear.
Exactly. Ibn Sina uses a famous example. Imagine a sheep standing in a field. A wolf steps out of the forest. Now let's look at the raw sensory data the sheep's outer senses are picking up.
Just the physical data.
Right. The sheep's eyes see a gray, furry, four-legged shape. Its ears hear leaves rustling. Its nose might smell a musky scent. But danger is not a color. Malice is not a sound. The outer senses do not perceive danger.
Right, the eyes just act like a camera lens. They just let the light in. They don't judge it.
So how does the sheep know to run away in absolute terror? The sheep hasn't been eaten by a wolf before, so it's not a memory. It hasn't read a book on wolves. Ibn Sina says that the estimative faculty instantly bridges the gap between raw sensory data and complex emotional survival reaction. It instantly perceives the intention of the wolf, the hostility, without needing to rationally think about it.
It's pure instinct encoded in the hardware. That is so incredibly insightful for the 11th century.
It really is.
But he doesn't stop at the animal mind. Humans have a third level, right?
Yes, the rational soul. This is unique to humans. It handles practical intellect, managing our everyday lives, and morals and theoretical intellect, which is the ability to grasp abstract, universal truths and logic. And it is within his discussion of the rational soul that we finally return to the hook of this entire deep dive.
The flying man.
The flying man, or the floating man. This is Ibn Sina's ultimate thought experiment, found in his work Al-Isharat, and its purpose is deeply profound. He wants to prove logically that the human soul is an immaterial substance completely separate from the physical body.
Okay, let's walk through it again slowly, because it is just so cinematic.
Let's do it. Ibn Sina asks you to imagine that a human being is created by God in an instant. This man is created fully formed as a mature adult, so he has a fully functioning brain, but he has absolutely no past, zero memories. He is created suspended in the empty air or in a void.
And a perfectly temperature-controlled void.
Yes, the air is the exact temperature of his skin, so he feels neither heat nor cold. His eyes are veiled, so he sees only darkness. The void is completely silent.
Nothing.
Furthermore, his limbs are splayed out in such a way that his fingers don't touch his body, his legs don't touch each other. He has zero sensory input from the outside world and zero tactile input from his own body.
He is a mind completely untethered from reality.
In this state, Ibn Sina asks, would this man know that he exists?
And intuitively, the answer is yes. Even if I can't feel my hands or see anything, I would still be experiencing the darkness. I would still be thinking, what is going on?
Exactly. The man would undoubtedly affirm his own existence. He would know that his self, his I, exists. Now, Ibn Sina springs the logical trap. He says, the man knows that he exists. However, the man cannot affirm the existence of his arms, his legs, his heart, his brain, or the physical space around him, because he has zero perception of them.
Okay, I see where he's going.
By the laws of logic, if you can affirm the existence of A, the self, while completely denying or being unaware of B, the physical body, then A and B cannot be the exact same thing. The self must be logically distinct from the body.
Wow.
Therefore, the core you, the soul, is an immaterial, indivisible unity that does not require a physical body to exist or to be self-aware.
It is, I think, therefore I am, but centuries before René Descartes ever put pen to paper.
And it is far more radical than Descartes. Ibn Sina is arguing that self-awareness isn't something you arrive at through deduction. It is the very essence of the soul. Plurality, division, limbs, organs, those belong to the physical body. But absolute, indivisible unity belongs to the soul.
So the body is just a vehicle?
Yes. The body is merely a temporary instrument that the soul uses to navigate the physical world. But the soul itself is logically prior to the body.
Okay, so Ibn Sina has proved that the core me is this indivisible, immaterial soul. But if I am this distinct thing, how do I connect to the rest of the universe? How does Ibn Sina prove that God exists in this incredibly tight, logical system? Because he doesn't just rely on faith.
He relies on what is arguably his most famous metaphysical contribution, the proof of the necessary being. This proof is so robust that it became a cornerstone of both Islamic and Christian theology for centuries.
So how does he do it? How does he logically trap God into existing?
He starts by looking at the nature of existence itself. He looks around the world and notes that everything we see is contingent.
I need a definition there. What exactly does he mean by contingent?
Contingent means that a thing can exist, but it does not have to exist. Its existence is merely possible. For example, you are a contingent being. You exist today, but you didn't exist 200 years ago. Your existence relied on a chain of causes, your parents meeting, your grandparents meeting.
Right. And like a wooden chair is contingent. It relies on a tree growing, a carpenter chopping it down and hammering it together.
Exactly. For a contingent thing, existence is not part of its core essence. The essence of a chair, the idea of a chair, does not require it to physically exist in reality. Existence is an accident that is added to the essence by an external cause, the carpenter.
Okay. So everything in the universe, chairs, humans, planets, is contingent. They all rely on something else to cause them.
But here is the crux of the argument. If everything is contingent, you have a chain of causes. The chair relies on the carpenter relies on his parents rely on the Earth's atmosphere, the atmosphere relies on gravity. Can this chain of essential dependence go back infinitely?
Well, I mean, why not? Why couldn't the universe just be an infinite chain of causes stretching back forever?
Because of the nature of contingency. Ibn Sina argues that if you have a chain of causes and every single link in that chain is contingent, meaning it doesn't have to exist, then the entire chain, taken as a whole, is also contingent. An infinite number of things that don't have to exist still equals a universe that fundamentally doesn't have to exist.
Yeah.
It cannot explain its own reality.
Because 0 plus 0 plus 0, even if you do it infinitely, is still 0. An infinite chain of borrowed existence still needs an original bank to borrow from.
That is a phenomenal way to put it.
Right.
Therefore, Ibn Sina concludes, the chain of contingent causes must eventually terminate at a being whose very essence is existence, a being that cannot not exist.
It has to exist.
Right. It doesn't borrow its existence from any external cause. Its very nature is to be. This is the necessary being.
And that necessary being is God.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is absolute unity. It has no parts, no genus, no differentia. It just is.
Yeah.
And because it is the necessary being, it fundamentally redefines how we must understand the concept of creation.
How so?
Many traditional theologians at the time argued for something called temporal determination. This is the idea that creation was a specific event in the past. God existed alone, and then, at a specific moment in time, God started the clock and built the universe.
Like a watchmaker making a watch and winding it up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Ibn Sina points out a massive logical flaw in that theology. He says, if creation is just starting the clock, then the relationship between God and the universe is like a builder and a house. A builder works on a house, but once it is finished, the builder can die, and the house stays standing.
Right. The house doesn't need the builder to keep existing once it's built.
So by that logic, if God just started the universe in the past, God could technically vanish today, and the universe would just keep running on its own momentum.
Which would be totally unacceptable in Islamic theology. It implies the universe doesn't actually need God right now.
Exactly. So Ibn Sina argues that true creations, creation ex nihilo, out of nothing, does not mean starting the clock in the past. It means constant, eternal, ontological dependence in the present tense.
Oh, I see.
The necessary being is actively emanating reality into the universe at every single microsecond. The cause must be contemporaneous with the effect.
So it's less like a watchmaker and more like a movie projector.
Yes.
The universe is the image on the screen, and God is the projector lamp. If you turn off the lamp, the movie doesn't slowly coast to a stop. It vanishes instantly. The screen goes black.
That is precisely Ibn Sina's view of creation. If the necessary being stopped imparting existence for one fraction of a second, the entire cosmos would instantly collapse into nothingness.
That is heavy. But it brings up a massive tension. If God is this perfect, unmoving, necessary being, constantly emanating reality, how does that God interact with us? More specifically, how does Ibn Sina explain the ultimate religious figure, the prophet?
It's a tricky balance.
Because if he's explaining everything through physics and psychology, does he just say prophecy is magic?
No, and this is where his synthesis reaches its peak. Ibn Sina refuses to accept magic as an explanation. He believes prophecy is the absolute biological and psychological pinnacle of human evolution. It is a perfectly calibrated alignment of the soul's faculties.
So how does a prophet get their knowledge? If it's not a burning bush talking to them, what is the mechanism?
He returns to logic. He says that normally a human rational soul acquires knowledge through slow, discursive instruction. You learn premise A, you learn premise B, and slowly you figure out the conclusion C.
Right.
But sometimes people have intuition. They can instantly grasp the middle terms of a logical syllogism without having to do the math.
Like a musical prodigy who just sits at a piano and intuitively knows how chord progressions work without ever taking a lesson.
Yes. Now take that intuition and scale it up to a cosmic superhuman level. Ibn Sina argues that very rarely a human being is born with an intuitive power so acute, so perfected, that he calls it holy reason.
Holy reason.
This prophet can instantly grasp the deepest truths of the universe without ever being taught by a human master.
Okay, that explains their wisdom. But what about knowing the future? Prophets make predictions.
That is where the inner senses come in. The prophet also possesses a supremely powerful imaginative faculty. This imagination is so strong that it actually acts as a receiver, tuning into the celestial souls that govern the planetary spheres.
Like an antenna.
Exactly. And because those celestial spheres are the engines that cause everything to happen down here on Earth, the prophet can actually perceive the chains of causality before they happen. They see the future not by magic, but by accessing the cosmic database of causality.
So they are basically reading the code of reality. And what about miracles?
Same mechanical explanation. We've established that the soul is distinct from the body. We know that your soul can exert influence over physical matter. Your soul decides to move your arm, and your physical arm moves.
Yeah.
Ibn Sina argues that a supremely powerful prophetic soul isn't just limited to its own body. Its willpower is so strong that it can exert influence over external physical matter. It can literally command the elements, causing rain, healing illness, or generating what we call miracles.
He has literally built a flowchart for miracles. He'd take the most sacred mysteries of religion and turn them into psychological mechanics.
It is brilliant.
But wait, let me push back on this system, because you said earlier that this first being, this necessary being, is completely perfect and unified. It only contemplates itself. If God is essentially a perfect, self-absorbed supercomputer, doesn't that fundamentally contradict the Islamic idea of an all-knowing personal God? How can a God who only thinks about perfection know that a specific leaf fell from a specific tree on a Tuesday?
That is the exact tension that made Ibn Sina a very controversial figure among later theologians. You have put your finger on the massive loophole. How do you reconcile the Greek unmoved mover who only thinks about himself with the Abrahamic God who knows every hair on your head?
Right, because if God has to watch the leaf fall, God is experiencing change. God is receiving new data. And if God is receiving new data, he isn't perfect and unchanging.
Exactly. Ibn Sina completely agrees with you. God cannot rely on physical senses. God does not have eyes. God does not experience time, watching things happen chronologically. So Ibn Sina devises a staggeringly elegant workaround.
Lay it on me. He says that God knows himself as the ultimate root cause of everything. And because God perfectly knows himself, he perfectly knows the complete, unbroken chain of causes that flow from him. Therefore, God knows all particular things, like the leaf falling, but he knows them universally.
I am struggling to see the distinction. What does it mean to know a particular thing universally?
It means God knows that if cause A happens, it necessarily triggers cause B. Cause B inevitably triggers cause C. This chain goes on for billions of steps, resulting in the wind blowing at exactly 12 miles per hour, hitting a specific oak tree, causing a specific leaf to fall at a specific nanosecond.
Okay.
God comprehends this entire infinite matrix of causality simultaneously from eternity.
So he doesn't need to look out the window to see the leaf fall. He just knows the mathematical formula of the universe so perfectly that the leaf falling is a solved equation in his mind. Exactly. He knows the particular event, not by watching it unfold in time, but by eternally knowing the universal causal chain that produces it. He knows the code of the matrix perfectly, so he never has to look at the screen to know what the characters are doing.
That is an incredibly tight, hyperlogical system. He has an answer for literally everything. He proved God without relying on scripture. He proved the soul in a sensory deprivation tank. He explained miracles as applied psychology. And he solved God's omniscience using universal causality.
He did.
You would think a man so dedicated to strict syllogistic logic would just drop the mic there. He built the ultimate machine.
You would think so.
Yeah.
But here is where the story of Ibn Sina takes a deeply fascinating, almost emotional turn, because in his later works, his language radically changes.
Really?
The man who wrote the dense clinical book of healing hits the absolute limits of pure logic. And when he hits that ceiling, he turns to poetry. He turns to allegory. He takes a profound mystical turn.
Wait, the guy who spent his whole life demanding causal proofs and geometrical arguments suddenly starts writing mystical poetry. Why?
Because he realizes that discursive thought, the step-by-step logic we've been talking about, is only for the earthly realm. Logic prepares the mind. It clears away the errors, like a broom sweeping a floor.
Yeah.
But logic alone cannot get you to the ultimate destination. To reach true salvation, to actually connect with the active intellect, you require a different mode of being. You require intuitive thought, illumination, which he calls ishraq.
It's like he built a massive ladder of pure logic. He climbed up every single rung, fighting tooth and nail, and when he reached the very top of the ladder, he realized the only way to go further was to let go and sprout wings.
That's a perfect transition.
Yeah.
Because wings are exactly the metaphor he uses. One of his most beautiful later allegories is simply called the bird.
Tell me about the bird.
In this story, human souls are described as a flock of birds that have been caught in a hunter's net. The net represents sensory, material existence, our bodily desires, our political squabbles, the chaos of the physical world. The birds are trapped in cages.
But some escape.
A few manage to break free. But Ibn Sina notes that even as they escape, they're still dragging parts of their shackles on their claws.
Like they can't fully get away.
Right. This symbolizes that as long as we are alive, we still have lingering attachments to our bodies. We still get hungry, we still feel pain. But these freed birds fly away, seeking the mountain of God. They pass through various perilous stages, eventually reaching the 8th story of the cosmos, where they meet the great king.
And what happens when they meet the king? Do they get a logical proof?
No. Upon seeing the great king, the source of ultimate beauty and perfection, they are not given a syllogism. They are so infatuated, so entirely overcome by his beauty, that they realize they can never feel at home in the physical veil of sorrow ever again. The logic has fallen away, replaced by pure aesthetic and spiritual longing.
That is gorgeous. And he expands on this idea of longing in another treatise, right? The treatise on love.
Yes. And this might be my favorite piece of his entire philosophy. He redefines love. He says love is not just a messy human emotion, it's not just poetry. Love is the fundamental cosmic force that drives the entire universe.
How so?
It is the urge, present at every single level of existence, to seek the good and to shun nothingness.
And when you say every level, you mean every level. Because I was reading this, and he scales love all the way down to inanimate objects.
He does. He argues that even pure inanimate matter exhibits a form of love. Matter is in a desperate, constant search to acquire form because it has this inherent dread of non-existence. So a block of wood loves taking the shape of a chair. A rock loves falling toward the center of the earth because that is its perfection.
That blows my mind. The entire universe is vibrating with this desire. It's not just cold gravity or chemical reactions. It's a cosmic yearning.
From the lowest dirt-seeking form, up through plants seeking sunlight, animals seeking survival and mates, humans seeking intellectual truth, all the way up to the divine soul loving the perfect first being. The universe isn't a cold clockwork of emanations. It is bound together, top to bottom, by an all-pervading cosmic love.
And he also writes about this feeling of alienation in the physical world, right? In the allegory of Hebi Yexon.
Yes, this is the allegory of the solitary wanderer. He contrasts the spiritual East, which represents the home of light, pure intellect, and our true origin, with the material West, which represents the home of darkness, matter, and bodily decay.
So we're stuck in the West.
Right. The protagonist must realize that he is a stranger in the West. His soul doesn't belong here. His entire life must be a journey to navigate out of the darkness and back to the East.
I just find it so incredibly moving that this medical genius, who spent his life fleeing mercenaries, surviving political purges, hiding in closets, and ultimately dying from a ruptured intestine, ends his life writing about cosmic love and the soul flying to the light.
It is the ultimate synthesis. The goal of his entire system, and Al-Farabi's system before him, was for the human soul to become a perfect miniature replica of the intelligible world. They wanted to mirror the perfection of the cosmos inside the human mind.
Okay, let's take a step back and look at the massive journey we just went on. We started with Al-Farabi, the weird, brilliant gardener reading by a watchman's torch. He built this rigorous structure, debunking astrology, mapping the sciences, outlining the 10 cosmic intellects, and warning us about the corrupt cities where souls simply vanish into nothingness.
And we followed that architectural blueprint to Ibn Sina, a prodigy living on the run. He proved matter isn't made of atoms. He proved the soul exists in a sensory deprivation void. He solved the existence of God through contingency. And then, at the very peak of human logic, he sprouted wings and flew into the mystical light of cosmic love.
To the learner listening right now, the overarching takeaway from this deep dive is the power of integration. These two men didn't see the world in tiny, isolated fragments. They didn't put religion in a box on Sunday, science in a box on Monday, and politics in a box on Tuesday.
No, not at all.
They wove it all into one deeply interconnected web. The physical geometry of an atom was directly related to the psychology of how a sheep runs from a wolf, which was directly related to how a king should rule a city, which was fundamentally anchored in the eternal emanation of God. It was a unified vision of reality.
It is a reminder that knowledge is most valuable when it is connected, when you understand not just what things are, but why they relate to everything else.
And it all hinges on the mind. Because both Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina truly believed that your soul isn't just some ghostly battery powering your body. They believed that your soul literally takes on the shape and substance of what you intellectually apprehend. What you think about, what you understand, literally builds the architecture of your immortal self.
Which is a heavy responsibility.
It is, and it brings me to a final thought for you to mull over as we end this deep dive. If these ancient geniuses were right, if our minds and souls are literally shaped and constructed by the information we consume and understand, what does our modern diet do to us?
That is a great question.
We live in an era of fleeting, fragmented, 15-second digital content, endless scrolling, contextless outrage, bite-sized trivia. If you become what you apprehend, what does that diet do to the fundamental shape of your soul?
Are we building virtuous cities in our minds?
Right. Capable of surviving the death of the body and reaching that cosmic illumination? Or are we fracturing our attention, trapping ourselves in the city of ignorance, forever unable to see the magnificent architecture of the universe?
It is a question that requires us to look up from the screens, past the muddy waters of our daily distractions.
To see if we can find that blueprint of the universe and maybe, just maybe, learn how to fly.